Why are we talking about degrees on a private pilot channel? I imagine some of you want to be an airline pilot in the future, and this is where the question usually comes up. Most of us, including myself, didn't have a clue what the pilot career looked like. Like any good Googler, you can find all sorts of results on the first page of Google. Sadly, those results are put there by advertisers who all want your money. Now, the typical mindset, especially for those not in aviation, is that if one is to fly big jets at an airline, one needs an education, which means going to a university and getting a degree. The main sections in this video are the pilot outlook in North America, requirements to get hired by an airline, and the different paths you can take to get to an airline. This is Boeing's outlook for aviation personnel for the next 19 years. As we can see, in North America, we need 128,000 new pilots, and that's 6,736 new pilots each year. The FAA issues just over 50,000 student pilot certificates per year. Not all of those make it to the airline pilot level, and that number varies from 4,000 to 6,000 per year. If we look at an average age of an airline pilot, that's creeping up into the 50s. Now that's a lot of numbers, so what exactly does that mean to you? If your goal is to be an airline pilot, this is a great time to do that. With a mandatory retirement age of 65 for pilots, a large number of current pilots will retire in 15 years or sooner. Here are the mandatory retirements from the three legacy carriers, American, Delta, and United. If we do a little bit of math, we can see that we need to replace roughly 2,000 pilots per year just due to retirements. And this is just with the three major airlines. We're not even talking about airlines like Southwest, or any of the regional airlines, or cargo operators. Based on the outlook, we need 6,700 pilots per year, and only 4,000 to 6,000 get their airline pilot certificates. On top of that, we're losing 2,000 to retirements. This is why you might have been hearing about the pilot shortage. Now, to combat this approaching doom, a few airlines started offering programs that help you get a job with them, kind of. In general, most of them want you to get the pilot training yourself, then build flight time, then go work for one of their affiliate regional carriers, and at some point when you have enough time and experience, you can get a class date at the airline. A lot of universities and flight schools are also now partnering with airlines to send qualified pilots once they've instructed and built time. Now that you have the pilot demand in the back of your mind, let's see what it actually takes to get hired. Feel free to research these yourself. These requirements might have changed by the time you see the video. One by one, airlines have dropped their degree requirements. When I say requirements, I mean that 4-year degrees were a required item and not a preferred item. The only one I'm currently aware of is FedEx. They still want a 4-year degree. This list is reduced for simplicity. There's obviously more requirements that I'm showing. What we can see from this list is that flight time is required, but degrees are nice to have, which makes you wonder why Google tells you that you need a pilot degree. Whatever the reason, please don't be the person who says you want an aviation degree because you want to get the college experience, or because all my friends are going there, or the campus is pretty. Remember, you want the shortest path from A to B that won't break the piggy bank. Let's take a slight detour and talk about airlines in general. Something you might already know is that airlines are a very volatile industry. They're often the first one to show signs of an economic downturn. If you were to ask any pilot who's been flying for more than 10 years, most of them will tell you the numerous airlines they worked for. There were furloughs, bankruptcies, 9/11, and of course COVID. One of the first things airlines do with bad economic times is they cut costs, which means reducing flights, parking airplanes, and laying off staff. Because of pilot unions, pilots do have some protection, but when the airline doesn't have money, eventually it can't pay the pilots. The most recent example of this was during COVID. We saw many pilots take early retirements at the major airlines, or at the regional level, some closed their doors, while others cut pilot schedules and their corresponding pay. Now, if you made it this far into the video, I know how all this sounds. You want to do the pilot career thing, and there's some guy on the internet telling you how unstable your dream is. But now that you know the vulnerabilities of what you're after, let's try to foolproof your career. Say you have an aviation degree and the airlines aren't hiring. What do you do? You'll be surprised to know that most pilots don't have an answer for that. Let me give you an idea. What if you had a degree in computer programming or business administration or something in finances? Now you have a plan B, and the beauty of living today is that you can do your plan B online. So now we have two different objectives, flight time and pilot ratings, and a degree in a non-aviation field. There are a lot of ways to do those things. You can pay for your flight hours up to a flight instructor and then make it to a regional airline. While you're working there, you can get a degree online. It's not easy by any means, but it's totally doable. Another option is to get a non-aviation degree and start working in that field, and you can finance your flying that way. Whatever you do, try to stay out of debt as much as possible. Something I hear from people I fly with is that during an economic downturn, they left aviation completely to do something else. Things like construction, finances, trucking, and all sorts of other careers. And this is why I'm asking you to have a plan B. If things don't go as planned, you can at least have a source of income while the airlines sort themselves out. Let's talk a little more about aviation degrees. Degree programs usually have a bunch of classes vaguely related to your major, and thrown in there are the ground and flight classes that you actually need to get the pilot ratings. If all you want are your ratings, you don't need the Introduction to Unmanned Aircraft Systems, airspace law, airport planning and administration, and the like. Universities are getting you a 4-year degree and a promise of preferential hiring with their airline agreements. It's not a bad idea, but that will take you 4 years and about $200,000 if you're doing in-state tuition. That doesn't include the time after you become a flight instructor to instruct and build time to be hireable. Also, good luck finding concrete numbers for how much a 4-year flight school will cost. I spent way too much time trying to figure that out. Oh, and here's some food for thought. These are the graduation rates for a couple of the big name schools in aviation. Once you figure out how the table works, you can see that about 30% of the people finish their 4-year degree in 4 years. Just saying. So here's where we are. There's a shortage of pilots, you don't need an aviation degree, and college/university is expensive. So what does that leave us with? Regardless of how you get there, you need to get these ratings to be an airline pilot. Usually you get your airline transport pilot or ATP rating during your training with the airline. A flight instructor rating is not needed, but I would highly recommend it. You can start making money at that point and have more options for jobs. We talked about degree programs, but what if you got your ratings at a local flight school and paid for just the flight hours and not the classes that take up an entire semester? You can become a certificated flight instructor and get enough flight hours to be hireable. Maybe it's not as glamorous and flashy as going to a big name school, but it'll cost you less than half in both time and money. Another path is to get your ratings and some flight hours and then get hired by a skydiving operation or an aerial survey company. You can be a ferry pilot or do aerial photography, or you can fly as second-in-command for a Part 135 cargo airline. I guess what I'm trying to say is that you don't necessarily have to be an instructor if that's not your cup of tea. My rough math says that you can get all of your ratings and certificates in about $45,000 to $60,000. And that gets you about 300 hours of flight time. And I do have a couple of videos on how to keep flight training cheap if you want to look those up. So now let's get this thing summarized. You could get a 4-year degree and be eligible for an ATP at 1,000 hours. That's 4 years and $200,000. You can do a 2-year degree and be eligible for an ATP at 1,250. My rough estimate says that's about $80,000 to $150,000. Or you can get your flight hours without an FAA-approved aviation degree and get an ATP at 1,500 hours. Just for a fun little comparison, if you found an airplane to rent for $150 an hour, you can get the 1,500 hours required for an ATP rating for as much as it would cost you to get a 4-year aviation degree. Now let me tell you what I did. I got my private pilot rating at a local airport. I did my instrument commercial multi-engine CFI at a 2-year college. Then I instructed until I had 1,200 hours. Then I went and flew Part 135 charter cargo until I had about 1,700 hours. And then I flew for a regional airline. And now I fly for a Part 121 cargo airline. If I could go back and do it all over again, I would get all my ratings at the local flight school and not associated with a college or a degree program. And everything else I would probably do just about the same. Hopefully this gives you some ideas on what it takes to get hired and a rough path forward. If you get nothing else from this video, know that now's a great time to become a pilot. You don't need a degree, and make sure you have a backup plan. Thanks for watching. Have fun, fly safe, and always keep learning. See you next time.